You're listening to the MLS Fantasy Insider, bringing you weekly tips, tricks, and advice for the official MLS fantasy game. Hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's show. Working on the social right now. Pretty excited with our guest that we have tonight. So looking forward to sharing that. We'll give Gene just a moment to see if we make his appearance, so we can do the kick off the show the official way it needs to be. So Gene's up there in New York with you all, Justin. So let's see if he keeps us honest with making sure we hit the record button, which from time to time we do forget to do. There he is. Hit the record button. Here we go, Gene.
Recording in progress.
There we go. We've got the record button. What's going on? Let's see here. So I've got the social out on the Twitter X Blue Skies. So if you guys would be so kind to share that, working on getting it out on Discord right now. Let's see here. We're live with that preview. All right, so there we go. So everything out there, please do like and share that. It helps us so much as we're getting everything going. If this is the first time you're joining us for the stream, welcome. You found the MLS Fantasy Insider, where we're talking about the official MLS Fantasy game, brought to you by Kickbase this year, the new home for MLS Fantasy. Though we know people dabble with other things, but we think we got some good advice. But we do focus on the Kickbase show here. And if you like that kind of content, like and subscribe, hit the bell notification, and you can catch us. We come to you live pretty much every Monday. I was sick last week, and so we had a little bit of a weird schedule, but we are back for you right now, and we are super excited with what we've got lined up for the show tonight. So we will go ahead and get started with that, so we can jump right into it. Hello and welcome to the MLS Fantasy Insider, our preview of Week 5 of the 2026 MLS Fantasy season. This episode is brought to you by Champions Cup Rotations, for those who prefer a more unpredictable MLS experience. Actually brought to you by the amazing Patreon supporters of the MLS Fantasy Insider. It's because of you that we are able to keep this project going. Find out more at patreon.com/MLSFI. I'm your host, Reid Connolly from MLSFantasyBoss.com, and tonight I'm joined by my special fantasy guest co-host, Ron, the fantasy physician Birnbaum. And we'd also like to welcome our very special guest, Justin Ruderman from Kickbase. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing well, man. Thank you for having me on. Excited to talk some Kickbase. It has been a fun season in the first few weeks, and I'm sure it's only going to get better. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we are stoked, happy to have you on here. I know we had Favi on at the beginning of the year to kind of kick things off, and so we're excited to have you on to share your insights. And I think we had you on at the beginning show too, Ron. This is your second time this year, is that right?
Second time. I'm doing great. Anytime I can be on the show,
there we go.
Doing great.
All right. Well, we're just going to jump right in. If you guys aren't familiar, you can look up Justin on Twitter X, and you can see he's got a nice little resume. Do you want to run down real quick your soccer pedigree there, Justin?
Oh, man. Sure. I started covering LAFC back in the day, 2022, I guess, and their MLS Cup winning season. It was a very fun one. And yeah, just expanded from there. Did a bunch of LA coverage, bounced around to a few different outlets, The Striker, SBI, just a few different places. Now I am an editor for MLSsoccer.com. So I write and I edit on the site. Anything you see on that site, you'll maybe see my name on a few pages. And I'm also now a fantasy center manager for Kickbase, as you said, the new home of MLS Fantasy. It's been a really whirlwind launch, and it's been really exciting. So love to have you guys' support and have you guys playing the game. It's been really fun. And yeah, you guys know more about fantasy than probably anybody else. So amazing to get your insights.
Yeah, I don't know if that's something to brag about or just a weird thing, but hey, we are here for it. We have fun for it, and we are happy to have you on. So we'll jump in. Kicking off the show as everything with our takeaways from week 4, high scoring games. And so Ron, I know you had a few specific things that jumped out at you that you wanted to talk about, and so I know Justin and I kind of have some general matchup feedback. But what have you started to tease out that maybe becomes a future article?
Right. Or well, some of both looking back and looking forward related to articles. I've been, writing the fantasy strategy clinic article and wrestling with it, with what Kickbase is primarily. And in last week's article, I took a look at just the top 25 players this from this year, and so far, if you look at those players, there's a big overrepresentation of players on winning teams.
Sure.
Right. So in other words, like one difference from the past is that Kickbase loves good players on good teams, on winning teams. And so, and that's was maybe like 20, only 3 out of the 25 were on teams that didn't have like winning records. So, and so there's a couple of reasons why that is. Kickbase, I think, is a sort of them that has gets scoring system. Okay. So that if things are going well and your team and they go really well, and then there's also sort of the opposite, like when it rains, it pours. And so it's like some of the mechanics of that is, first of all, there's a bonus for winning, so 15 points for winning, and a negative bonus or a penalty for losing, so 15 points for losing. But why do teams win soccer games? Well, because they scored more goals than the other team did, right? And for every goal your team scores, even if you were the goalkeeper, even if you had nothing to do with it, you're going to get 5 points. I mean, that's sometimes the goalkeeper has something to do with it, but let's say you're going to get 5 points. And if you when the other team scores, you lose 5 points. And because when you win games, it's because you got more goals than the other team. And so that's going to add. And then another factor is that there are clean sheet bonuses to be had by players all over the field.
Yep.
So in the past, or in some systems, it's just the goalkeepers and the defenders, but there's also midfielder and forward clean sheets. And most clean sheets involve a victory. In other words, very few are 0-0, right? So often if your team has a clean sheet, it's also going to win the game.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's just one more thing that adds up for winning. And then another big piece of that, or you could say, well, okay, who wins games in MLS? And it turns out, I think there's 2 characteristics of teams that win games in MLS. Teams that are very good. Well, I guess we'll get down the line into what that means, and also home teams. Yep. And so and that's something I'm going to want to write more about. But home field advantage, and we've known this for years, right? Like that home field advantage in MLS is one of its distinguishing factors as a league. And long term, it's been slowly lowering over the years. The American football analysis. Yeah. American Soccer Analysis. They have this cool graphic. I'll share it somewhere on the Discord. That's like about the magnitude of home field advantage. It's still like home teams over a long period of time average 1.5 points per game. But in 2026 so far, that's 2 points per game. Mm-hmm. So in other words, home teams in the first 4 weeks of this season are playing at the level of the Supporter Shield winners for most seasons at 2 points per game, right? And so another marker for who are very good teams are mostly who are the teams who are in CONCACAF, right? Mm-hmm. And that's not 100% the case. But also, when I checked last week, the CONCACAF teams, there are 9 of them. We're going to mention them in the housekeeping. They were close to 2 points per game. In other words, the CONCACAF teams, like mostly they got there by being good last year. There are a few exceptions of teams that are not quite as good. I mean, that'd be Philadelphia, LA, and Cincinnati struggling. But everybody else is really good. And so if what you're trying to do in this game is take good players from good teams, emphasizing home teams, but good players from good teams that are going to win, you ran into some trouble last week, right?
Absolutely.
And the trouble begins with 3 letters: CCC.
All the same letter.
Right, CONCACAF Champions Cup, and so, what the challenge amounts to this, and a lot of people learned this last week, and I won't go into all the details, but these teams are playing 5 matches in a row within a roughly 15-day period. And there's plenty of guys on these teams who can play, back-to-back matches within a week, no problem. But 5 matches in a row in that short of time is, it's like more than the World Cup asks of people. And it's or close. And so what we've seen in the past is that, and we saw it again, is that teams have to rotate to cope with this. But this year, I think a lot of teams decided that they were going for like a playing rotation, playing sandwich, as in the teams were rested people for the middle game. So it was MLS, CCC, MLS, CCC, MLS. So the middle game, we saw a bunch of players rest last week. And I tried to warn some people about that in the fantasy strategy clinic article. And so we tried to get some of the word out about that. And so now we're going to have to think carefully about what we're doing this week. And I'll leave that for the
and I'll touch on some. I definitely have a couple of comments on that I'll get to. But I think those are great tidbits. And yes, the home field advantage is definitely real. Justin, if you want to respond to any of that, you're welcome to, but also just what kind of fantasy takeaways do you have from week 4?
Yeah, you hit a lot of them on the head right there. I think the biggest one is obviously the CONCACAF Champions Cup. I am avoiding those players for the time being when it comes to these midweeks, and avoiding that sandwich game as you were describing, because I captained Anders Dreyer this week in a lot of my leagues, as was customary for the first 3 weeks, and it worked out great. But then it didn't work out so hot in game week 4 because he did not play, or he did not start at least. And so that goes hand in hand with my other point, which is that you need to ensure that you are captaining a player that will start, because captaincy is obviously so important that you need to ensure that that is a player that's not a rotation risk, that's on a guaranteed starting spot. So that is what I'm going to be looking out for in the future, is somebody that is obviously a top player on a top team, as you were describing, but is also a locked starter for that week, because otherwise you're putting yourself in a risk without a vice captain or a bench that these features could come in the future but are not there at the moment. And that leads me to the matchups, as you guys were describing. I just think matchups are everything in Kickbase. You have to know who's going to play each week, what the good matchups are, whether that means, as you were saying, a home field, or that just means that they're playing a poor opponent. Maybe there's a tactical adjustment or a tactical game plan going head to head with another team that you like, that you think, okay, well, maybe they're going to have the ball a lot, or they're going to sit deeper, they're going to defend a lot, different things like that. Maybe you want a goalkeeper who's going to get a ton of shots on them when their team is sitting deeper, for example. There's all those different types of pieces that you can be looking for. And then another one that Favi and I have been looking at a lot is these revenge games, these games where a player plays their former team. We've seen a lot of them score goals, whether it's Ty Baribo in week 1, or Wiki Carmona against Red Bull scoring a brace, which he scored 0 goals last year, right? So all of these little tidbits you can pick up on, and it becomes a personal game. We've seen a lot of, we have a Play the Pro league as well. We've seen a lot of, like, Thomas Muller and Hani Mukhtar, who are in it, are always captaining themselves as the light goes out on me in our studio here. So I think that is what it is. But ultimately, I think that it is, anything can happen, basically. And that is MLS, but that's Kickbase as well, because as you're saying, winning teams, big players are so important. But I didn't expect the Revs to come out and beat Cincinnati 6-1. I wasn't going to put Luca Langoni in my team because that's not what I expected to happen. And then that's what happened. And all of a sudden, Revs players are some of the most valuable players of the week. So sometimes you'll get it right. Sometimes it'll happen. You might see Vancouver winning that game handily, but you wouldn't have seen Revs winning that game handily. So you just gotta pick that, and then don't overreact. I think off of a single week, which maybe I need to take my own advice when it comes to Dryer. But I think that it's when we're 4 weeks in, we're adjusting to a new game. A lot of it can be an overreaction to 1 week scoring. An underwhelming week from somebody. I remember week 3, for example, a lot of the Red Bulls players didn't do well because they played CF Montreal and lost 3-0. And now I still think that they are valuable players. It didn't become invaluable just because of one poor performance, right? So I think that that is a good one to keep in mind as well early in the season.
Yeah, no, those are great. And I want to touch base on some of what both of you guys said before I kick at this in mine. The home advantage, it's true. I know we've talked about that historically on the show. If you're new, you haven't heard that, but those of you who've been with us for a while, that has been a statistically significant stat for MLS. That is correct. But I will say that this is the first year in the Kickbase system that I have been finding myself more open to away teams than I have in the past. And some of that is exactly because of what you were saying, Ron, is this system. And a lot of it's because there are 100 different data points that we pull from in this game for scoring. So we saw some similar elements in like circa mid 20 teens legacy fantasy game, but with those more data points there, players get rewarded for doing their job. And at the foundation, that has always been a reason that we, the community, have liked the MLS fantasy game over things like Fantasy Premier League, is because more stat points give players points for doing their job. And I think we're seeing that it can also happen on the road. Like it was a week or two ago, Atlanta against RSL, I believe, and I can't remember if Atlanta or RSL won, but one of the RSL players, I think Atlanta won, RSL maybe got 2 points, or maybe I get it backwards. Anyway, one of the
RSL won that game 3-2.
There we go. It was 3-2, but Moranchuk was in like the top dream team because of as that team and how he did. So winning doesn't always matter. RSL, I believe, was the road team in that time, so they got a good result during that game. And like even this week, we saw some road teams, not just because they won, but with like some keepers, we've seen people who are getting involved in shots, people who are getting involved in interceptions, like being able to generate that. And so I think that goes into what you were saying, Justin, of knowing that matchup is like, what are the chances of some of these stats happening? That's why we're trying to dig more into the stats and figure out what it is. And that's historically also been a reason why I have enjoyed having the unlimited transfers, because it does have you think about all of the matches every round. And as we got a little bit into last week, it's not more challenging, it's not better challenging, it's just different challenging when how you're approaching some of that fantasy game. So I wanted to make those connections as I had those thoughts as you guys were sharing. I really appreciate those, and I can't agree more about how you're reacting to the CCC impacts, especially with a game like Cincinnati. And while they're struggling in general, I will absolutely own to that. When you come into a game with 7 players rotated, you're going to expect your star players just coming back for a full 90. You're still missing your star defensive player who is the voice of the team. Like there's definitely pain when you're doing that. So there's reasons behind these. And so, yeah, those knee-jerk reactions, things to be avoided, but there were good things to pull from RSL. Other general fantasy related player elements I want to be sure that we mentioned. Already started talking about Atlanta. They've started scoring. They've been getting some goals the last 2 rounds. I saw that in their first game against Cincinnati, the potential I remember talking about. They've not won all of those games, but I think they're coming into an easier next couple of games where we maybe see some opportunities for them and maybe worth considering as some fantasy options there. Orlando and Montreal, that had some goals both ways, but we've been talking about Montreal as a team to target. We've been talking about Orlando as a team. Are they good when they don't have their starting keeper? They didn't have that this week. They did get the win, but I think those are at least still 2 teams that aren't highly ranked, and you can be looking at as opportunities for some teams to target. On the other side, New York City, we talked about that last week as well, of how their midfield was hard to choose from, but we did come back and own up that Nico was a good option. He did great this past round, and a lot of that is because he's generating those bonus points. We've talked about that historically. Forwards who pass, forwards who get these assists and are involved in more than just shooting are fantastic fantasy targets. He's doing it all. He's passing, he's getting shots, he's getting goals, he's doing all of that, and we saw that pay off big this past round. I also want to call out Houston. This is the second good performance from several guys on their team, kind of up and down a little bit, and people like even McGlynn. We've seen some of his fantasy numbers pan out again here in Kickbase, as we've seen him do last year. Not a whole lot of sample size, and they have had more success against maybe some of the weaker teams, but I think that they've got some good guys to keep an eye on as we go into some of these games, especially since they're not in CCC, not impacted as much. And then I wanted to mention, let's see here. I'll just jump to the San Jose Seattle one. That was a game we talked about last week as well, as not knowing how to take that. And I even mentioned it on Twitter at some point when someone was like, hey, you don't have anyone from this team. And I told them my response was, I'm not quite sure how to read this game. With the way these teams have been playing, I could have seen it 2-2, 3-3 both sides. I could have seen a 0-0 draw, and what do we get? 0-1 to Seattle. But if you look at the stats, you just see that that San Jose was like, they had more possession. They killed when it came to shots and all these things. So I mean, that they had their monster XG. And so that was why I avoided that game, because it was last, and I was like, I am just not confident in any kind of read on this. And we saw why. But that was, again, another team where the away goalie had a great haul because of some of those results. So some of that stuff is comments we've made before playing out. Some of these are kind of emerging fantasy things I just wanted to mention. But those are some general takeaways that I had from this past round. Check chat real quick. Looks like we've got a few guys doing pretty well. Eric got 971 points last week. I'm not going to talk because I captained Messi. So I will say, as we come, Gene also had a strong finish. Good job, Gene. He's number one in the seasonal MLS Fantasy League with 6,045 points. So good job, wow. Gene. I will mention, he's killing it. I will mention, we talked about this several times in Discord, so it's no secret. I mean, lots of people have said this is the example week of why people have been so loud about the desire to have like rolling lockouts with Kickbase. And from what we've seen in the chat, it's definitely on the radar. I know that some updates or things are working on. I'm not asking Justin to confirm anything, so I don't know if that means the next update's going to see stuff, but it's this. I think people see it. It's like, this is definitely has given a lot of visibility to it, and we know from the feedback that we've seen posted in the Kickbase Discord and the Fantasy Boss Discord that it's definitely something that people are looking at, talking about, and as we all know, I mean, it's just technical implementation of things like this.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we very much appreciate all of the input and the suggestions coming from the community. We are definitely doing our best to stay tapped in and respond to these suggestions as well. I'll give you my personal perspective on the lockouts. I think that the feature that I would rather have added ahead of time is the bench. To me, the rolling lockouts are... I totally understand why everybody in this chat or Discord would want to have it, because I think it advantages anybody who's a real sicko and is watching every game on a Saturday and has the ability to change their team in and out. But I think it also, on the other end, disadvantages a more casual player who maybe isn't watching every game, maybe isn't tapped in to change their lineup as soon as the starting 11 comes out. And I think that if you have a bench, then at least you have players who are coming in for anybody who isn't playing, and it adds another strategic element without disadvantaging anybody. So personally, that's where I would go with it. That is not to say that is what Kickbase is going to do in the future. That is not to say anything about that. That is not fully my decision. But that's where I stand on it. And I think that, if either way that you can add it, we definitely want to balance that out in a way where, if Messi's not starting, maybe we add a vice captain, things like that, because you weren't the only one who captained Messi. There are a few players in our Play the Pro League who did the same thing.
Did you have a comment, Ron?
Well, which is just that it is the case that when there's rolling lockouts, you really have to like look at all the lineups. And I mean, that's a joy for me because I love doing this.
Sure.
But it's sort of work, we'll just say, or it takes your attention. But the other side of it is without them, and I'm not trying, well, don't want to make foment a debate about it, but from a practical matter, this is like what I focused on in the third fantasy strategy clinic article, which is how do I figure out if my players are going to play? And I won't go through everything that I put in that article, but I want to point out at least one aspect of things, which is I would say there's kind of, I guess I would call it like a gradient of certainty as the weekend goes on about what's happening. So at the very beginning of the weekend, you actually can check the lineup of the first, usually like the first team or the first teams that are playing if there's two games at the same time. So like for now, 2 straight weeks in a row, it's going to be the home game in Toronto. So you actually can check those. So if you need some certainty, like, metaphysical certainty, barring like somebody getting injured during warmups, which has happened, like you have that. And then the second thing is that you have, for the Saturday games, you have like the injury reports and the disciplinary reports, and particularly the injury reports talking about the Saturday games. Those come out on Friday. So you can see those before the whole league locks. But if the games are on Sunday, you can't see those reports.
Yeah.
So as games get later, the just like risk, we'll say doesn't play risk increases because the available information is less. But you also have to do some research to get to that information. So that's another sort of sicko type activity that you have to participate in if you really want to avoid those misses.
Yeah. And no, you guys both make very good points, and that is the traditional argument, Justin, as well, about is it a more sicko approach, is it not? If we ever do get rolling transfers back, then I will go ahead and say, for those of you who don't know, you can go to the MLS Fantasy Boss Discord, and there is a lineup thread where people post the lineup. So if you don't want to follow it on social, if you don't want to actually watch the game, we do post that on Discord, so you can check that out. But that's the traditional argument. I would be fine with bench as well, or just exploring what options would be and how that could be implemented. So I think those are very, very fine approaches. One thing I do think exacerbates it some, which is probably less common, or at least less extreme in the European leagues, is our time zones as well. And so that's a big thing. I know we see comments as well when people say like, oh, well, I live in Europe, and so that would mean I have to get up. Like, totally get it. Totally understand all those things. And it goes both ways. Like, I remember getting up at 3 a.m. to catch the EPL lockout for things like that. So when I was doing Fantasy Premier League, so it goes both ways. We can't make it for everyone. But glad that it's on the radar. I think this was a great week that captures that. The last two things I want to mention before we hit into our next segment is, of course, I also sent out the message that in general, speaking of feedback, there was a survey that was pushed to a lot of Kickbase users when they logged into their account. That wasn't for everyone. Like, it just kind of picked random accounts. I happened to get it, and so I just was like, hey, you guys go do this. I didn't realize it wasn't that because I just got it and sent it out there. But big kudos to the Kickbase team. They did send the link that was shared out on the Fantasy Boss Discord for other people to be able to provide feedback for that. But so definitely appreciate that continued feedback there. Some great questions as well. So I hope that was helpful. Right there.
Yeah, absolutely. We went through it all today. We got the responses back and started analyzing them today. So we're already on that, already responding. And yeah, we'll try and have a couple more surveys or something that's available for people who want to continue to provide their suggestions or feedback. We're working on something to provide that to everybody as well.
Love that. And the last thing,
is it still open? Sorry.
That one is not open, but we will create another thing that'll be more long lasting for everybody to just provide feedback and suggestions and ratings or whatever type of things that they would like to let the team know here at Kickbase.
Perfect. And the last thing I'll say is, for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've complained about the schedules being wrong about games that are on Saturdays and Sundays. Got feedback on that. It is an Android thing. So if you have iOS, you likely see the games correctly listed between Saturday and Sunday. I've been told it's an Android app, and the version has not pushed yet for Android. So if you are on Android, then whenever the next version comes out, you should see it correct. It may not be a big deal. It's really not that big of a deal for me. It's just like slightly annoying whenever I'm looking. I'm like, it isn't. Those games are not on Sunday. Why does it say they are on Sunday? It's a pet peeve, but that's a solution for there. So thank you guys for the feedback. Thanks for the like awesome success that we see in the chat where people are doing. We are going to be right back after this short break, and we're going to give you some housekeeping because it's important this week, and then jump into our player picks for round 5. All right. Let's see here. Chat. You went skiing, Eric. Oh, good job. Good job. There's a comment here. You might know this, Justin. Do you know if people win the prizes from those leagues? I know how do those come out?
You would get an email that would alert you of your winnings and sort it that way.
Perfect. Excellent. All right,
Yes, so check your emails if you think you want a prize.
We hope you do. Congratulations.
We do. If you do, you crushed it for sure.
That was definitely not me this week. I think the comment I made on Twitter, I was like, my team was devastated this week. So
I'm with you. I'm in the same boat, man. I got cooked by the CCC. I did not properly prepare.
Full because MLS. So I was still in the boat of like, maybe it's still early enough and they were all home this week. So like I'm more worried this week than I was last week, but I guess I should have been more worried then too. Okay, so that is out there. Let me get this social thing here and post.
So I know you're going to talk about the upcoming CCC and the housekeeping.
Yes.
But so one thing I would say is the weekend. There's the CCC games, then there's the weekend, then there's the international break.
Yep. I got that.
So the international break, I don't think we're going to lose people to the international break. I don't think that's the case. But it also may slightly take some pressure off some players because some might, because lots of teams because lots of teams won't have a game the next week. No teams have a game the next week.
The next game, I mean, we still have games.
No, there's like 2 weeks till the next MLS game.
That's April 4th.
Right, but
there's the next games. Let me check.
Right, so there's no games
like one more.
28th and the 29th.
Correct.
So in other words, I think one like along the lines of what Justin was saying, of like not fighting the war that just happened, is it's possible that a lot of teams have done the rotating and now they can try to do a 2-game push knowing that they have a week off afterwards.
And we can see, I think that's, I'll make the point and you can make that comment. I think that's a good one to point out. But yeah, no, that's good. All right. Socials out. So again, please do like and share those so we can keep everything going. Hello and welcome back. We're doing our quick housekeeping as we talk about week 5 and the player targets. But first, remember, as we mentioned before, there are already several CCC impacts that we saw in this past week. There are more CCC games this week. This is pretty much the away leg for a lot of these teams. And so they're going to be on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So depending on when you're listening to this podcast, take into account that. LAFC is the only team playing on Tuesday, so they get that early game there. Then on Wednesday, it's Miami versus Nashville, so that's still a domestic game. Philadelphia is traveling, and then Seattle versus Vancouver, a domestic game there still, but some travel. Vancouver's getting off easy with this one. And then San Diego as well has some travel on Wednesday, and then Thursday, LA Galaxy and Cincinnati are traveling as well. So keep an eye on those. For those keeping track, this is also the first round of the U.S. Open Cup. No MLS teams are involved, but we'll keep you up to date on that as we get deeper into the tournament when MLS starts to actually come in. But we say all this because there's one more big thing to keep an eye on, and that is we have an international break coming up. And that break is next week. So after this round of games, there will be no more MLS games until April 4th. So you're going to have a week off next week. Teams are going to have a week off next week, but there will be some call ups with these international friendlies as we prep for the World Cup. So there is a chance that some players could get a call up. Maybe they leave this weekend, maybe they don't. Just keep an eye out on the call up list and see what happens. I think Ron, you had some comments you wanted to say about that.
Right. Well, I think like a lot of people going into this whole stretch of 5 games in a row between like MLS and CCC for 9 of the teams, the ones you just rattled off. I thought that there might be some dangerous situations last week and even more dangerous situations this weekend. But I'm not sure that that's how it's going to play out. And it's because I think actually a lot of the danger happened last weekend. Like there was a lot of rotation either in the CCC games themselves or last weekend, like Messi not playing or Brian White not playing most of the CCC game before that. So if you take the fact that the teams can look out to, for most people, a break next week, I actually now think it's going to be a lighter situation for that. We're going to see less rotation. I know that's like, you can't be certain, but one thing I would pay attention to is if you see any player who's played 4 games in a row that look like 90 minutes of 4 games in a row, it is very hard, I think, to play the 5th game.
Yeah.
Like a complete game. So I think there's enough, we need to do it. Like I might put out another like emergency fantasy strategy clinic video or something on
the fantasy defibrillator.
Yes, like an ICU type thing, which is like, is this player on life support because he's been on 4 games in a row? So
Love it.
But don't overlearn the lesson of last weekend, but you're going to have to pay a lot of attention as this week wears on.
Yeah, and I will add that the first round of those international break games come on Saturday, the 28th, so there is a gap there. But just as always, this is international call-ups. Minutes could be managed. Just keep an eye on those lists as they come out. Other than that, for MLS, proper game start Saturday, March 21st at 1:00 p.m. with Toronto versus Columbus. And so again, a little bit earlier than maybe usually games around 2:30, but keep that a little bit earlier. And then on Sunday, March 22nd, we have 1 p.m. with Cincinnati versus Montreal and New York City versus Miami. So 2 games kicking off at 1:00 there. Both of those involve CCC teams. In fact, the Sunday block of games is very heavy on CCC teams as well. So that could factor into rotations and travel and how players play. So keep an eye on that. Otherwise, if you're thinking, Reid, who's are these people who are on call-ups, and are there any injuries need to work on? Like, yeah, like Justin Chi, Tristan Blackman, keep an eye on those guys for injuries. But everything else, head over to the MLS Fantasy Boss Discord. MLSFantasyBoss.com/Discord is the easiest way to do that. You can find our mega reference there where the community tracks a lot of these players. You'll see things shared as well throughout the week as those announcements come out there. But head over to MLS Fantasy Boss Discord to find out about those players to keep an eye on. Okay. There's the housekeeping. It was important. The call-ups and rotation, everything, this is the important part whenever we have the housekeeping there as well. But now let's talk about players that we are targeting for round 5. And Justin, I am very interested to hear your thoughts as we go through here for how you approach picking players in Kickbase, which is, I know, a technique that many people are working on developing with the news. So any insights you have to share, would love to get them. But let's kick off with Ron. Who are you looking at for keepers and defenders?
So, you guys talked about this a couple podcasts ago, and I wrote a little bit about it. But I think, keepers are like a breed unto themselves in Kickbase this year. And so I think there's sort of 2 models you're looking out for. And that is the like clean sheet meisters, like people who are very likely to have clean sheets. And I think it's tough this week to call clean sheets. Although I will say, on the whole, clean sheets tend to happen at home, right? So it's been so far this year, 44% of clean sheets, like the clean sheet rate at home is 44%, and the road clean sheets is 17%. So it's almost 2 to 3 times more likely at home than on the road. So keep that in mind. But if you're looking for keepers, I would go with ones who've had clean sheets. And so a lot of them. So Takaoka and Lloris would be that model. Then you also have keepers who've done well based on just saving a lot of shots or getting a lot of other types of keeper related bonus points. And the ones that I'm interested that sort of fit more into that category are Christian Kalina of Charlotte, Matt Turner of New England,
Yeah.
and James Pantemis. So look, James Pantemis, just give him as an example for a second. Last year, he was one of the top keepers. He was the top keeper last year. And some of it maybe had to do with penalty saves and things like that, but it wasn't because Portland was such a great defense. In fact, it might have been in part because they weren't such a great defense and he got to save a lot of balls. So they're playing LA Galaxy. LA Galaxy takes a lot of bad shots that can be saved. That's like a Gabriel Peck specialty. And so I think Pantemis has a good shot at running up a lot of bonus points from saves. And if you need cheap, I would look at Schwacky from Nashville. That's who I'm looking at right now.
What about defenders?
Oh, yeah. Okay, defenders. Sorry, thank you. Yeah. So defenders, more complicated in some ways. I think that there's a few things I want to say about defenders in general. One is when I looked over the numbers from 2025, there was only a single defender who was like ended up in the top 25 players. In other words, overall, I think over time, I would tend to take the minimum number of defenders until we learn otherwise. I think the numbers have been a little bit inflated in who are in the top 25s because of people with goal contributions that can't have a sustainable number of those goal contributions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so overall, I would say try to keep it to 3. And this is one where I do want to pick guys from teams that win games and don't take, and if somebody's played 4 CCC games in a row, 90 minutes, maybe don't take them. So here's some people I'm looking at are Woledzi or Lovitz from Nashville. So then I'm looking carefully at the New York City versus Miami game, because if Miami has a tough game, then I don't want Miami in that game. But vice versa, if they had an easy time of it in CCC midweek. So I'm talking about projecting out after that game. So I certainly still like Gray if I'm favoring New York City FC. But if I want Miami, then it's Mikhail, who's like touches the ball a million times and his base is really good.
Yeah.
And then I also keep an eye out for now Region has started his first game, played 79 minutes, and he was the top scorer in that 0-0 tie. So I'm not, maybe more for like down the line, but I'm still looking at him because he looked good. Like he might be the new Alba. Like he looked really good. And so then next guy, Laborda. So Laborda, so same thing, CCC risk, but he rested a couple games ago. If Blackman is still injured and Laborda is not decimated by what happens in the CCC game, he is on fire and still does well even when he hasn't gotten goal contributions. So the next one that I'm looking at, still CCC risk, is Dua from San Diego. Why Dua? Well, he's also been a high bonus point earner on a very good team playing at home, and he won't be playing in CCC because he got a red card in the CCC game before. So he will be fresh as a daisy. He will be playing. And then my last couple ones I'm considering are Finn Sermon from Portland. Not sure that LA Galaxy has its offensive track record together, and he's been scoring pretty well. And then also I was impressed by how Walker Zimmerman did with Toronto last week. In other words, he did well without goal contributions or a clean sheet. He showed a bonus point floor. So those are all the guys I'm looking at defensive wise.
Yeah, great call outs. Justin, who do you have?
Yeah, I love a lot of those picks for sure. Notably, Schwacky in the back I have on my list as well. It's hard to go wrong at that price point of 2.3 million now. I am leaning honestly away from. I love the Pantemis pick as well, by the way. I think that's a astute pick, but I'm leaning away from the guys like Takaoka and Larice. These are guys in maybe a fantasy Premier League, like you were discussing. I would lean towards those type of players who are more likely to get a clean sheet. But in Kickbase, I think it's a lot about who's going to make the most saves, who's going to be under a lot of pressure in their goal. And I think that if you are going for that cheaper option, you have Shvaki, you have a Duran Ferry who maybe he's a rotation risk. We saw that Cisniega started in this weekend because of Ferry starting in the Champions Cup, and he gave away a very questionable penalty and 3 goals. So I don't think that he's fighting for that top spot even now against the 19-year-old. But I am opting more for somebody like a Daniel in San Jose. He's going against a high-flying Vancouver team who granted have CCC midweek, but I have been a fan of Daniel for many years. I think he's one of the top shot stoppers in the league, and I think that if you put him up against a really strong offense like Vancouver, you're going to get a lot of stops, you're going to get a lot of saves, and he can distribute as well. So I think that's a good pick. I think Andrew Thomas as well for Seattle is a pretty quality pick. They maybe don't have as great of an opponent when you're thinking of getting a lot of saves in Minnesota. But at that price point, 9.5 million, I really like it. And similarly, in the defenders, I have Tino Lopez, who made his first MLS start last weekend, was fantastic for Seattle, had a very late game-saving clearance off the line. Those are things that, you would never get points for in any other fantasy game, but in Kickbase, you're heavily rewarded for big plays like that. And I thought he was stand out, and at under $1 million price, it's hard to turn down when Yamar out. If Yamar's not there, I expect Tino Lopez to be in there, and that's a great pick. Another one, looking at these cheaper options just so that you can fit players more forward, I look to spend a lot of my money, as Ron was saying, in that midfield or that forward, and go a little bit cheaper in that goalkeeper and defense to pay for it, basically. And I think that Lucas Harrington is another great option at just $4 million in Kickbase. He's playing an SKC team who are honestly looking better than I expected them to look, but I still don't have a ton of confidence in that team. So I think it's a pretty good option, even though he's away. And the last one I would mention is Eddie Segura. This is a player who I didn't even expect to start, but he has taken that starting spot over Ryan Hollingshead at LAFC, mainly for tactical reasons, I think. But it has worked out really well for him. He's basically a center back playing in a fullback role, so he's getting a lot of those passing contributions that he wouldn't get, but he's still playing like a center back and getting those defensive contributions as well. So a lot of options there, I think. But yeah, those are the ones that I've been looking at for this upcoming week.
I like the Segura. I like everything you said. But the one thing about Segura is he got rested in the last CCC game, and so if they kind of follow that pattern, I think he's got a pretty high likelihood of being the man.
Yeah, absolutely. And
his scores are great.
And he's not too expensive either. $13.4 million, if I'm correct, on Kickbase, which is low end for LAFC defenders, right? So I think, if you're going to go for an LAFC defender, he's definitely the right option, I think.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to anything you guys have said. You've covered a lot of the options. Again, I love a lot of those picks you were doing at defender, Ron, right there. I think we talked about Takaoka last week, talked about some of where he was falling in the averages and some of the bonus points. And he jumped up this week because of a lot of those clean sheets and the saves that he did. But I think the San Jose Seattle game is a great case study for what we're talking about here with the bonus points, in that yes, Thomas got the clean sheet, so he got bonus points for that, but Daniel didn't even crack 100 points. And wow, that's weird what happens. But I said at the top of the show, San Jose was dominating in possession, they were dominating in shots, so he didn't have those actions. And then I said Kickbase rewards you for the actions. And so when you look at other players, they're not getting the bonus points for, like, a block shot's plus 10 points. A big chance saved is plus 15 points. And so there's all those actions that you have to be getting shot at to get those points, in addition to the save. So that has to be happening. You also are having bonus points from sort of those sweeper keepers, those keepers who are involved with get interceptions and getting involved with their feet. Like that's also not there for someone like Daniel. It's why we were potentially looking at Kalina last week. Why I started Kalina, I went with him, is because we were saying, is Messi going to be here? What sort of opportunities will he have to be involved? And he wasn't there, but you can still see he got an average score. Kalina did because there was action. He was involved with more than we're seeing there, and so I think that um, I think Lloris is maybe one of the better clean sheet chances, even on the road, because Austin's not a great scoring team. They tend to get a goal. I think they've only had one of 4 games where they've not scored, so I think they may get something by, but LA's not allowed anything this year. So, but you have to ask yourself, is he just going to get an average score because he's not getting those bonus points like you guys are talking about? Same thing with Kalina this week. I'm not off him because I do think that young Red Bulls team could have some opportunities, could generate anything, and I'm mostly not big on Charlotte's defense, and so I think there could be opportunities there. But Schwake, I think that's a great option that you already mentioned. Yeah, you guys have already mentioned the big ones I think to keep an eye on there. I made a note of, is this Celentano's redemption? But I think that falls squarely into Cincinnati may get a clean sheet this round, and I don't know if Celentano will crack 140, if that's really where he's going to kind of land for what could happen if there's not a lot of action there. So no one to add with defenders. I think you guys have covered a lot of the great options right there. So let's move on to the position I'm most excited about this week, and that is midfield. Justin, who are you looking at?
I looked at this guy last week. Favi asked me on the Kickbase podcast, who is the guy that you have to have in your team? And I told him Sebastian Berhalter. It worked out pretty well. So I'm going to keep sticking to my guns with that one. I think that he is, yeah, I mean, he just does it at all ends. The clip that I'm sure you all saw that went viral in that Portland game convinced me that he is the guy. When he was tracking back 50 yards after losing the ball in the attacking third to put in a brutal slide tackle challenge on Christopher Velde, take the ball off of him. Velde went rolling for 5 yards, and Berhalter said, "That's my ball. Thank you very much," and went back on the attack. So, and that was in stoppage time, up 4-1, right? That tells me that no matter what the score line is, no matter what's going on in the game, Sebastian Berhalter is going to put 110% and go get those bonus points that you've been talking about. It doesn't matter where it is. And he also, along with my other pick, Georgi Mihalovic, is a set piece taker. And this is another one that I should have mentioned at the top with our Kickbase takeaways. Set piece takers are almost a cheat code, I think, in Kickbase, because if you're getting a lot of corners or attacking set pieces, or even better, direct free kicks, then you're going to get crossing points, you're going to get passing points, you're going to get final third passing points, you're going to get chances created points. You're getting all of these additional bonus points just because your player is frequently taking set pieces. And I think nobody takes more set pieces probably than Georgi Mihalovic in this league. Sebastian Berhalter is close to him probably. So I think that, yeah, it's a great option in those. And then if they bang in one of those free kicks, even better. Berhalter had a penalty this past weekend, so it can happen anywhere. And then another guy who I have been high on since he came to the league with San Diego last year, Yep Tverskov. This guy, this is what I love about Kickbase, really, because I think in a lot of other fantasy games, maybe in the past, he wouldn't have been as valuable as he deserves to be. He is one of the best players in the league, one of the best midfielders in the league, but because he plays maybe a deeper position and he is more of a distributor, he is that center hub for San Diego. Everything's going through him, which means he receives the pass, he plays the pass. And if you're getting a lot of passes, if you're racking up a lot of involvement in that way, you're going to get a lot of points. And then he also pushes forward enough where he's going to get those occasional goal contributions as well. So I think that those are kind of the premier picks that I've been looking at. I also think if Diego Luna is back this week, which I've heard some rumors that he's trying to get back into the playing fitness realm, if he's ready to go, I think that is a very sneaky pick at 29.3 million, because that RSL team is already clicking, right? You have Gozo, has Arcani, Giavogi has looked fantastic to me, talked about as the 9, but he's dropping deeper, getting involved. If you just stick a Diego Luna in that team, it all of a sudden becomes a very cohesive, creative unit in Salt Lake. And we know Pablo Mastroeni is able to get, the best out of whatever he's given there. So I think that that's a sneaky pick if you're looking for one. And then if you're looking for a cheap player, I think we all know at this point, Adri Mehmeti is that guy. He is blown me away. I've seen him live a couple times now, and I cannot wait to see his development going forward because, yeah, he's just so involved. He is so assured on the ball. He's always passing the ball forward. He's always making the right decision on the ball and looking for maybe the more difficult pass, not always playing it if it's not there, but he'll look for it. And if it is, he'll hit it as well. So at $1 million price is impossible for me to turn down if I need a player at that price in midfield.
Yeah, it looks like we lost Ron, and so he has a big list here. So I had a truncated list because I knew Ron had a lot of guys to talk, and so I'll cover a few of mine. We'll see if he can get us back in. But yeah, I couldn't agree more with Berhalter. We kind of talked about it last week. He's pretty much no question copy paste in my team every week that he's available. So consistent, so great with his numbers. He's exactly the kind of midfielder that you're looking for when you're trying to make picks. A name that I'll add on there that I know you didn't mention and also overlaps with Ron is Almiron. And when you look at Atlanta from this past week, a lot of guys got goals. And we even talked about Moranchuk getting a couple weeks ago had some good results here, which made me wonder if wingers were going to have some more impact than necessarily some of the central guys, which I think is still for debate. But Atlanta started to click. I think they have a couple of good rounds coming up for them to keep that momentum going. And if that momentum's there, then it's traditionally been Almiron, who is the one who goes, the playmaker. He gets those opportunities. And so I think he's a great addition that you could have to your team, or at least someone to have on your radar as you're going into this round, because I think they have a good matchup against that DC team, which has given up some goals. And I know they had a good round last week, but I don't think DC is a solid team, definitely when it comes to defense. I also have got on here. Oh, good. There's Ron here. I'll finish up mine and throw it over to Ron. I still think BL is a good one you can keep an eye on. You mentioned Tverskov already. I know he had some rotation last week, and if you're afraid of that again this week, I was real impressive with Chikaris as well coming in at midfield. He's had not like the blow your head off numbers, but he's had some consistent numbers for the past several games. And so I think if you're worried about that, he's a backup you could have in your team where even if both of them play, you can still be like, yeah, you'll get a solid score from the guy. So he's there. And then I mentioned early on as well, McGlynn had a good game last round. He was kind of hot or cold last year with some of that production, but they're going into an away game to Dallas. Houston's on the road to Dallas. This is a Texas derby that we have going on, so there's a lot of skin in this game, and Dallas has allowed opportunities for people. They had a great result last week as well, but they have given space for teams. Houston had a good result, and so I think that's going to be a really good game this last round that more than likely has fantasy points, offensive fantasy points for both sides, and we're going to see defensive fantasy points. So I think McGlynn as well. A couple other players I have questions for. One is Morales. He got some good scores last week. I don't know. I still don't know which midfielder I really want to go on if I'm looking at a New York City midfielder. I think I'd much rather lean towards defense and forwards options if I'm going with there. But I think he's definitely someone you could look at or consider, maybe depending on how many players you're working, maybe a fifth or sixth option there for your depth chart. And then Mukhtar is another one. They're at home. Could be a good game. He's just not given the production that I've wanted, which was an awkward rut that we found ourselves in last year. Last week it was because of rotation. So there's some caveats to this as well with CCC that's going on, but I could definitely see Mukhtar being someone that you go to. Welcome back, Ron. I just jumped ahead with a couple of guys real quick. I know you have a nice list. I wanted to be sure you have the opportunity just to share yours.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I missed some of it. So if I repeat some things, it's just reinforcing the genius that preceded me. But I heard Justin shout for Mihailovic and love it. And so, and as you mentioned in your takeaways, I think Atlanta is starting to come together
Yep.
as a team. And I think people could consider Almiron, who just had a hat trick of assists. And the team looked like a little more like the Tata Martino team that was like that great team from 2017, 2018. Not quite there, but like closer. And so, and Moranchuk, 3 goals in 2 games, I think is you have to consider that. So, you need a lot of midfielders if you're going to do the rush. We'll get to that where you have to have 6 midfielders. So like a lot, I'm going to throw out a lot. And you might need some cheap ones. So from SKC, Manu Garcia, or the new guy who scored a goal in his debut, Lasse Berg Johnson, LBJ. New Norwegian international, looks strong against the Galaxy, cheaper player. Hartel, don't forget Hartel. They have a good matchup, I would say, against New England. I'm still interested in the LAFC midfield unless somebody plays 4 games in a row. So like I'd love to see that like Eustachio, if he was starting to come back from whatever little injury and he's not on the questionable list, then he's like, you have to consider him, but either Delgado or Chouanier. Like if it looks like Eustachio is going to be out and it's going to be Chouanier, score 2 goals, like those are good people. Berhalter, you guys mentioned, of course, Evander. So did one of you guys mention Evander?
No, but okay, I love the pick.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like he's still brilliant. And when I think about it, like, okay, why did Montreal do well against whoever they beat 2 games ago that like surprised everybody? Well, they like stunned them with man marking, but like try to man mark Evander. I don't think that'll work. I just think I think he might eat them for breakfast, and they know they need to bounce back from that last game, and so I think he'll be motivated. You mentioned just people I heard you guys throw out: Tverskov, Rodrigo de Paul, maybe. Maxi Morales, and Carlos Gil. I know that's a lot of names, and it's like a whole lot of names, but you need like 6, and they've got to be on different teams. And some of them need to be on different teams from other people you're taking for that one rush. So
this is a great rush this week. So I look forward to talking about that one. Great names, a lot of great options, and that's I could see the logic behind a lot of these things. But we have to have forwards as well. So depending on how many you're going to have, we're going to have a nice list there. So Ron, who are you looking at forward?
Okay. So, Reid, you are very rarely wrong about anything that you say, I would say, in anything you do.
Quite the compliment.
But on last week's show, you said something that I think was wrong. And that is that you thought Messi was not as good, kind of like may not be as automatic a choice.
Sure.
Now, of course, Messi was gone last week.
Sure.
But in one of the articles, I looked at Messi and how he scores in Kickbase compared to Legacy Fantasy, and Kickbase likes Messi more, relatively speaking. He is a stronger player in Kickbase in 2025, and so I'm going to start with Messi.
Okay. Unless
you get some signal that they're also going to rest him in that game, and I know that's a risk. It's on Sunday, but Messi. Petar Musa, hat-trick in the last game. Rivalry type game against Houston. Houston, not a great defense. I like Petar Musa. Brian White, now a Golden Boot, lead. So then, and now going to San Diego. So, okay, naturally we're going to be thinking about Dreyer, but got to consider Dreyer. But what about Ingvartsen, who's off to a great start, and like Dua, got a red card, so he is not going to be playing in the CCC game. So he is almost guaranteed to be there for you on Sunday with San Diego, and he's doing well. So another one that I like a lot is Gabriel Peck for the LA Galaxy, who also is, whether he's doing great for winning games for the LA Galaxy, he scores well in Kickbase because he takes a lot of shots. So he takes shots on goal. So he's going to have a floor. And so I still like Gabriel Peck. A cheap one, if you're looking for a super cheap forward, is Gage Guerra. Gage Guerra from Portland, under 1 million. So if you're looking for cheap, and then I think others that people will consider: Surridge, Nico Fernandez, Velvet, Guillermo, and Jovalic. So I know I named a lot there, but kind of in the order in which I'm thinking of them.
That's fair. Justin.
Yeah, absolutely. I like a few of those picks, namely Gabriel Peck. I put him a little bit later in my potential captain picks because, yeah, I think that, as you say, he's going to be very active. He's going to take a lot of shots. And I don't think that the Portland defense has been too good, which is why Pantemis, we were talking about earlier, might be a good pick. But yeah, I think that you're going to see a lot of shots, a lot of attack from Galaxy in that game, especially when they're trying to bounce back from that defeat to Sporting Kansas City, which I'm sure that they weren't happy about. And I also don't want to overreact to that game. And they were scoring goals before that game. I don't want to overreact and say, well, they only scored one against an SKC team that I don't think is very good. Well, I think that they're gonna bounce back with Gabriel Peck there. I had Anders Dreyer in my list, but I think that you've convinced me that Ingvartsen is the better choice there, just for rotation reasons. Yeah, cheaper rotation reasons. And a couple weeks ago, I can't remember exactly who it was against. He scored a couple of goals and cooked me in Kickbase again in my head-to-head that my opponent had him and I lost because of it. So I don't want to get punished again. And then Brian White was absolutely on my list, as you mentioned, joint top of the Golden Boot race. Of course, we'll see exactly what happens in CCC if he plays there. But as you mentioned, he already had a little bit of rest. So I think he should be good to go. And in that attack, there's just so many options in that attack, whether it's Mueller or AZ Jackson or Badval is becoming an option too now. There's so many pieces, but I think just get the tip of the spear, right, with Brian White and hope for the best there. Looking at that Houston-Dallas game that we've talked a bit about, Guillermo has been my guy, man. I put him in my first Kickbase team week 1. He scored me a brace on debut. I was very happy with that. And it's just, I picked him because he's in form. And he is a player who seems to me is a very form player. He scored a hat trick in preseason. That's why I had him in week 1. It worked. He's back last week. He scored another goal. I'm going to keep riding the hot hand. And I think that, yeah, as you mentioned, he's got really good pieces around him. Mateusz Bogusz, I'm a big fan of. Jack McGlynn, you've mentioned, has dropped into a little bit of a deeper role this season, but has still looked very, very good in that role, still creative from a deeper role. So I think that, yeah, there's a lot to be had in that Houston team. They've looked very good to me. And Julian Hall, if you're looking for another cheap option, I think Gage Guerra is a great option, but there might be a little bit more rotation risk there with Felipe Mora and such. Whereas Julian Hall, I think, is a little bit more nailed on, but also a little bit pricier, but still cheap at $4.5 million. So different ones in different price ranges, depending on what you're looking for at the forward position.
Yep, love the picks. Called me out, Ron. I know the comment I made about Messi was sort of comparing him to some of the other forwards at the time, and how their bonus points were coming down, which for me is still very much a work in process for understanding the bonus point system, what comes out there. But I've a complicated relationship with Messi, and it was very difficult for me to buy that scarf right there for the wall. But I captained him last week on my team, so I try to not let things like that, personal preference, blind me when going through here. I think that Musa is the biggest injustice we have from last week, though. Didn't really mention him, and I think he's been on a good run of form as well, and is definitely worth talking about in these conversations you guys already have. And so that's a great add there. I love Nico. I love the Guillermo as well. Those are my top 3 that I'm looking at as well that I'll add in there. Messi there. Love the White, love Baribo, the Turgeman as well. I think I'd add to that list, but I think you guys called it out. Those are the top ones. I know Surridge, you had mentioned, Ron, is kind of other. I think that one is sort of has that CCC element to it. Let's just see where things come in. Turgeman there with New England. What stood out for me with him was he didn't have as many goal or assist contributions as others on New England did during that Cincinnati game, but still had a very strong score. And so to me, that speaks to underlying bonus point producing numbers that will play out more long run with the fantasy production. And so that's what I enjoyed about watching him during that game right there. Okay, last two things, captains, and then we'll hit this rush week 5 that you've already teased, Ron, because I love it. I love this week's rush. So, Justin, the big question: who are you looking at for your captain right now?
Yeah, I think any other week I'm picking either Messi or Dryer, but I don't want to risk the rotation. As I was saying earlier, you have to be so sure on your captaincy. You can maybe risk it if they're not your captain, just put them in your squad. But if they're your captain, you need to be sure that they're going to start. And so that leaves me with 2 LA options. One from LAFC, Denny Bouanga, and the other, Gabriel Peck. I think I'm going to opt for Peck just because of what I've been saying. He was suspended this week. He scored a hat trick in CCC the last midweek, and he's going to probably start again away in this midweek and should have no issues with rest because he was suspended due to that foolish red card. But he's locked in there, and as we've been discussing, I think he's gonna. Yeah, there's a lot of attack to be had for Galaxy against that Portland team. Boanga, I think, is another option. I believe against Austin, right? Another defense who hasn't been quite up to the par this season, but the Boanga sure could be a rotation risk because he has been playing all of these games. He has been starting all of these games, but to me, Boanga is the most fit player in all of MLS.
Yep.
He has had no problems at any point. I remember a few years ago, he hopped on a flight from an international game that he was playing with Gabon, flew 18 hours from Africa, landed about 2 hours before the game at LAX, drove right over, and then subbed into the match and scored a goal. So that type of thing will never leave my mind. Yep. And Boanga continues to do it every single week. So even if he's played, I can't possibly see him as a rotation risk. And I continue to opt for him slightly over Heung-min Son, partly just because he's been getting higher points thus far in Kickbase this season, but also because I think that he is on penalties more than Son is going to be. I think that Son is just the unselfish guy. There was an interview with Son a couple weeks ago where he said, I'll let Denny have the golden boot. I just care about winning. And so that is the type of thing that I pay attention to and think, okay, if you're not worried about that, because they both took a penalty, I believe, in that early on this season. But got to continue to go with Boanga there. And if you don't like any of those picks, Petter Musa is always there for you if you'd like him.
Very true. So for me, I am wondering if we are in ACB always Captain Berhalter territory right now. Just this consistency. I think it's a good game that's coming up for him. He did a PK last week as well, and so just so much good going on right there that I am considering Berhalter for my captain pick right now. Some of that is due to some uncertainty due to CCC with some of the forward options that I have gone with previously, but yeah, I'm looking at Berhalter for my captain. I think that's a great one. Gene in chat comes out there with Kuipers. He says bad Philly team that has to go to Mexico City midweek. I get it. I think that's a bolder option, but I totally see where you're coming from with that. So very good. All right, let's wrap things up with talking about our rush for week 5 of the Kickbase rush. Love this. Did you have a comment, Ron?
No. Can I just throw my captain?
Oh, sorry. Did I skip you?
Yeah. No, but it's okay. Because you're flowing.
Well, I see who you put, and I remember what you were talking about in the forward section, and so it just checked that box for me.
Right. So let me say this. My intention is to captain Messi. I will, of course, read the tea leaves and try to see if something makes me think that it's too risky. And have heard Justin and even heard myself say you got to watch out about Sunday players. But I think it's like just when you've been burned by Messi not playing is when the next explosion happens. So that's why. But the backup plan is Musa, and I'm going to thank Justin Ruderman for that. It's a good call. Like that's he's straightforward.
I felt like you just in my head you said that. Sorry about that.
Because I like him as forwards. But
you like him so much. All right, now let's wrap things up with the rush week 5. I absolutely love this rush. If you guys haven't been following it, it's basically just a little unique twist every week on how you can sort of theme your team and go through there. And so it's been super fun. I've enjoyed it. The theme this week is a $300 million budget. You are locked into a 3-6-1 lineup. So listening to Ron with 3 defenders, need 6 midfielders, but the catch is you only get one player per club. I love it so much. I mean, I have a couple of thoughts of how I'm planning to approach it, but Justin, how are you tackling this week's rush?
I am tackling this week's rush first on those 6 midfielders. I think
Yep.
that is how you have to focus. I don't think that 300 million's a lot of budget, so I don't think that you're going to be too strapped for cash.
No.
I think what you're going to be more worried about is that one player per club. That's the bigger challenge, I think, is fitting those players in, because you might want. I know I did when I was building this team, but I'll read to you my lineup that I drafted thus far. And to my point, I still have almost 40 million left in the bank here. I've gone for Andrew Thomas in goal. I might upgrade that to Daniel now that I'm looking at it. Got Harrington and Dua and Arfston is my 3 back. We didn't mention Arfston, but the other 2 we've been talking about a lot. Of course, Berhalter, the lock for all of us. Almiron, Mihalovic, Pep Biel, Delgado, and Carlos Heel are my 6 midfielders. And then I got Gabriel Peck up top as my lone striker. So I just think if you go with those premier midfielders, I think all of mine are premier midfielders, you can't go wrong. And they're players who, as long as they don't get rotated, which I think most of those are not rotation risks, Delgado and Berhalter could be slight rotation risks, but outside of those, they're non-CCC players, and they're going to be ready to start, ready to go, and very involved. We've talked about, I think, all of them outside of Carlos Heel, who amazingly didn't do a ton in terms of goal contributions in a 6-goal victory, but I think he's going to be back again. And yeah, you can't go wrong with a player who is so involved as Carlos Heel is. Everybody's going to be passing him the ball. And obviously he's taking a lot of set pieces as well. But I should shout out before I move on, I think Timo Werner is one of those picks, because it is similar. If you're going to go San Jose, that they just kept feeding him the ball. When I was watching that Seattle game, that Sunday Night Soccer, they just kept passing Timo Werner the ball and said, all right, what are you going to do? We're going to go make runs for you, play the ball. And I think that if you're in that situation, that's how you rack up a lot of kick-based points. The more you touch the ball, the more points you're going to get.
Yeah. Ron, I got you this time.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So from my earlier contributions to this podcast, I could be at risk for the criticism that's like, Ron just like shotguns a bunch of names and like throws out a million things, and now I still don't know who to pick. So I'm going to give you my exact lineup that I think I'm going to go with at this point, and that is as follows. So Matt Turner, it's showtime for the U.S. men's national team. He needs to show why he is going to take the starting job away from Freese. In this game, it's Matt Turner. Zimmerman, so defense, 3. Zimmerman, Laborda, Dua. So that's right. I'm now done with Vancouver and San Diego, right? Because I play those 2. Okay, so 6 midfielders: Mihailovic, Almiron, Rodrigo de Paul, Delgado, Berg Johnson from SKC, and Evander. And then for my forward is Messi. And if my math doesn't add up, it's because I haven't done the math yet. That's why I threw Berg Johnson in there. I thought you'd make the math work. But but actually, that's probably how I would approach this, which is like, first put the people you want, and then like figure out if the math doesn't work, what's the person you're going to take away to make the math work. Like, that's how I would approach that. And so that's what I got.
Yeah, the way I approach this is I agree, Justin, starting at the midfield there, because I think midfield and forward, those are the first 2 spots that I filled. Those are going to be your big point producers. And so those are the guys that I want to prioritize the teams from there as well. Other names I'll add to the list that we've mentioned some during the show and you guys haven't mentioned yet. I mean, I'll add McGlynn to that list as someone you could consider for your 6. He had a really strong performance. Last week, he got a goal there. Week 2 wasn't so great for him. Week 1 was pretty average, but we know he can get really involved. Dallas is in a bit of a rut right now, but they've tended to allow some shots, tended to allow some goals as well, especially last week against San Diego, which is a weekend San Diego. And Houston's on a good run right now. So I think that there's opportunities for Houston, and so that's why I think McGlynn is worth adding to that list. But then also just looking at some of the form, and if you had mentioned this, Justin, I apologize if I over looked it there, but I still think Chikaris there with San Jose is a good shout out for an option. I don't think you're going to want to go with Mooney at all. I mean, his numbers are dropping off with there. I don't think there's a forward option to go with, so I think he's a great shout out for a midfield option that you have right there with the game that they have coming up. So otherwise, you guys have nailed it. I love this challenge. Like the decisions you have to make. Like I've got Musa up top. Like I don't have any Miami players right now because I'm concerned about what happens with Messi and if I'm willing to take that risk again. But I think that's the big question that we're dealing with CCC, which just makes this format all the more entertaining and fun to approach, coming on the heels of all this rotation and everything. So if that was planned, kudos to you guys. But yeah, love this rush. That's kind of how we're approaching it. Definitely recommend building from that middle up and then circle back around there to get your lineup there. So look forward to hearing how people do. If you make a pick that we haven't talked about and it works, brag about it. Please do. Comment, put it on Twitter, put it in the Discord, let everyone know about your successes as well, because we'd love to hear about it. That's all that we have for the show tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Justin, for joining us as well to talk about this. Let's wrap things up with our plugs. Justin.
Yeah, first of all, download Kickbase. Follow us on Instagram, on Twitter at KickbaseUSA. But my personals, if you're looking to find me, I am at Justin Ruderman _ on X, Twitter. I am at justin.ruderman on Instagram. And I also have my own outlet, Upper 90. I try and put some YouTube videos out as much as I can. I will try and get more of those up. My predictions are up right now. Those are with Favi. You can all go and look at Laugh and how bad they are already in week 4. But yeah, it's a good one. You can find me anywhere. I have a pretty unique name. I think you should find it.
Ron.
Justin, I'm really grateful for you to join us on the podcast. And actually, maybe you can help me with my shout out. So I feel like there's been a sort of underselling of the team specific Kickbase challenges. Mm-hmm. So like there are these ones that like I do the Galaxy one. You can actually do as many as you want, but like I've been doing the Galaxy one where you just pick 6 like players from whatever your team is. And I think that it's like a really easy way if people are just like, yeah, I just want to do a little bit of Kickbase stuff. And it's kind of cool to think about who your team is going to put out and who's going to do well. And people often feel like they really know a lot about their own team, even if they don't know about the whole league. But one question I had is, is it the case that how you do in the season of that, is it your whole season of that, or is it like the top 5 scores you get? I wasn't clear about that.
No worries. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing this up. It is definitely you're hitting the nail on the head there, because it is something we're going to push a little bit more this week. Send it out to everybody. Make sure everybody knows about it, because it is a fantastic option. Yes, as you say, you set your 6 players from one team, and basically what it is we have that option of competing season long with your against all of the fellow managers from your club, your Galaxy, for example, all of the fellow Galaxy fans competing against each other. But also we accumulate those points into a club challenge leaderboard that is pitting the fan bases against each other, figuring out which is the best fantasy fan base in the league. And that means that if you have more players, more managers playing that game, you're going to get higher points. And if you're obviously playing better, having better teams, you're also going to score higher points. So we accumulate that all into one large leaderboard. So you're working not only against your Galaxy fans, but actually together, so that you can beat the LAFC fans, so that you can beat the Miami fans. And that's kind of the idea behind it, so that you can not only compete within those leagues, but as a league together against each of the other fan bases to prove which fan base is the best fantasy fan base in MLS.
So no, it's really interesting to hear this. I was not a plant. I want the record to be clear, but I found it really fun. And it's like for people who are like Kickbase bewildered, it's also sort of a really easy thing to do. And I'll just say the second part of my shout out is to like the Discord community that is just like hanging in there, wrestling with all the changes and figuring out what they're doing with all these things. Just like keep hanging in there. Don't go away.
That's a great one. That's a great one. I am going to then go ahead and give a shout out to the MLS Fantasy Boss Discord. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for being part of the community and participating this year. It's just always a pleasure. It's been going strong for several years, and it's just always a pleasure to see the community and how everyone contributes to the big fantasy project. And of course, don't forget to check out MLSFantasyBoss.com. Check out Ron's articles. We have Team Ranchinator as well posting information is there to kind of help you find out more information and to dive deeper into understanding some of the mechanics of a fantasy. So check out all of that. Yeah, it's just such a great ride to have everyone along with. And as always, good luck.